Theo Greminger and I are back with bold predictions for Fantasy Football Week 9 and the rest of the season. Let's go win this week. Let's go win our championships. Theo, what do you got?
Well, if you're looking to win championships, one of the players you want to make sure you have on your roster is Nico Collins. And if you don't have any exposure to Nico Collins right now, Matt, you're in big trouble. Nico Collins averaging 21.3 points per game when he went down. He was wide receiver 2 overall when he went down to injury. Now we have no Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins is trending to return in week 10. I don't think they're going to rush him, but there are some people internally who seem annoyed that they even gave him the IR designation. They think he could be ready to go right now. And Nico Collins is going to come back to a situation with no Stephon Diggs where he's going to actually be in a larger role than when he got injured. And Nico Collins, Matt, you're talking about a guy who had a 25% target share. You're talking about a guy who had a 40% air yard share. And Matt, he is still top 12 in the NFL in red zone targets despite missing time. Nico Collins was trending to be a league winner at the beginning of the season, and I think it's going to be even better when he comes back. Nico Collins will be the wide receiver 1 overall from week 10 on.
This is going to be very difficult for Nico Collins to pull off, and here's why. There's a lot of other elite wide receivers in the league, like guys like Jamar Chase. Have you seen what CeeDee Lamb's been doing lately? Seen the target share for CeeDee Lamb lately? It's going to be tough. The pace of play in Houston is slow. Less than 2 plays per minute, though the team pass plays per game have been good. 37.7 team pass plays per game ranks number 7 in the NFL, but they're top 5 in neither of these categories. And part of the reason why they were passing more early in the season was because Joe Mixon was out. With the Joe Mixon back, he's in there getting 25 carries, grinding clock, and that is going to make it very difficult for Nico Collins to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy, the number 3 wide receiver in fantasy. I think top 5 is very reasonable. I think it's too bold given the team situation, the team dynamics that we're seeing now in Houston. But I love staying in Houston. I love touting Houston receivers because of the law of the conservation of targets. Stephon Diggs, sadly, out for the year. It means that a healthy Nico Collins can enter the team just like Puka Nacua did. First game back, bang, 100-yard game. I'm expecting that from Nico Collins. But I'm also expecting a top 20 rest of season for Tank Dell, because Tank Dell had the tightrope procedure. He's started slow. He's been unlucky. He's had some drops, but Tank Dell was an elite playmaker last year, and now with the loss of Stephon Diggs, it gives him more flexibility to maneuver around the formation, go in motion more, come out of the slot more, and now that he has more confidence in that lower leg, you saw he was 4 for 4 last week, so the catch rate, the efficiency improving. I love Tank Dell the rest of the way. I think it's going to be the Tank Dell and Nico Collins show, as well as John Mechie. John Mechie looked great in week 8. He is a top 40 option the rest of the way. Robert Woods is dust. Dalton Schultz is a guy. These 3 receivers are going to soak up all the targets in Houston moving forward. Certainly it's going to be Nico Collins at the top, but watch Tank Dell start to deliver spike weeks, and little John Mechie coming in, 2nd-round pick. I like him in deep leagues as a top 40 wide receiver the rest of the way.
Yeah, we're all rooting for John Mechie, a big player profiler favorite when he was coming out, and his story's incredible. And Matt, you mentioned the Houston Texans, like they're the number 2 seed in the AFC right now, certainly a Super Bowl contender. And one of the positive surprises out of the AFC has been the Denver Broncos. And the story with the Denver Broncos for multiple weeks was their incredible defense. They're just completely shutting people out, really putting pressure on the quarterback. Obviously, Patrick Surtain back there. But when we look at the Denver Broncos recently, it's been the quality play of Bo Nix that has been standing out. And Bo Nix is currently QB9 overall, and Bo Nix from weeks 5 through 8 is quarterback 3 overall. He's giving you rushing production, and this until this past week, very minimal in terms of touchdown passes. Bo Nix seems to have turned a corner, and I know a lot of people will say, Yeah, it's the Carolina Panthers, and we can't really put too much into that. But Bo Nix is really, really playing well. I think he's really coming on his own. He's an older rookie, and I think people are sort of waiting for Bo Nix to fall out of the QB1 land. I think on the contrary, I think Bo Nix finishes as a QB1. I think a lot of people fading him in Dynasty are going to be really, really upset that they have no exposure to Bo Nix. By the end of the season, he's a lock top 15 Dynasty quarterback moving forward, if not higher. And I think he finishes as a QB1 for the rest of the season. Bo Nix, like if you take away those first couple of duds, his whole season looks fantastic. And Matt, he's doing it with what will be the worst weapons of his entire career.
Yes.
The wide receiver room in Denver right now, easily a bottom 6 wide receiver room, if not lower. And lower than that. And sort of like the resurrection of Javonte Williams in certain weeks. He's getting production out of guys like Adam Troutman at tight end. Like it's only up from here with Bo Nix. And at the time, people were criticizing that draft pick. It actually looks super smart. The Tennessee Titans, if they could do it all over again, how much would they have liked to trade down a spot or two and take Bo Nix?
I'm with you. And I'm going to build on your number 4 bold prediction with my own number 4 bold prediction, which is there will be 4 rookies among the QB1s in fantasy. So 4 top 12 rookie quarterbacks this year. That's 30%. 30% of the top 12 quarterbacks the rest of the way, they're going to be rookies. They're going to be rookies. That's Caleb Williams. That's Jayden Daniels, of course. That's Bo Nix. And that's Drake May. A big reason why, the schedule. So we know Bo Nix, he's only had one 250-yard passing game, and that was against Carolina. So that's the argument against Bo Nix. But here's the argument for Bo Nix. Next game is at Baltimore. They get shredded by opposing quarterbacks. Then it's at Kansas City, garbage time. Then you got Atlanta, Las Vegas, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Los Angeles, and he finishes out the fantasy season week 17 against Cincinnati. So it's actually a great schedule for Bo Nix. He's already gotten past Pittsburgh, the Jets, the Chargers. He's already faced a bunch of difficult matchups, and he's still a top 10 fantasy quarterback at this point. What happens when he faces all these easy matchups the rest of the way? And then what about Drake May? That's the big one, right? The bold prediction is Nix and Drake May going to be top 12. Well, can we just talk about the Patriots' schedule for a moment? At Tennessee, and then at Chicago, difficult game. I understand that. Then it's the Rams, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Cardinals, the Bills, and the Chargers to finish it out for Drake May. So once he comes back from that concussion, it's going to be wheels up for Drake May and Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams had a bump in the road, but you looked at the rushing production. The second leading rusher for the Bears last week was not Roschon Johnson. It was Caleb Williams. So just based on Caleb Williams becoming more comfortable running the ball, I think that's what's going to propel him into the top 12. And, of course, Jayden Daniels. So it's rookie quarterback season the rest of the way.
Yeah, and really the 2024 rookie quarterback class is completely lapping the 2023 class. That's a discussion for the offseason. But the enthusiasm with Anthony Richardson, like the 4 guys you just named, good luck trading Anthony Richardson for Bo Nix right now in Dynasty. The season has made such an impact at the quarterback position. But Matt, for my next prediction, this is really a week 9, but also sort of a rest of the season prediction. DeAndre Swift was the first running back to sign in free agency, signed with the Chicago Bears. And it was sort of like, we're like, okay, DeAndre Swift's off the board. Let's wait. Let's see where these guys like Derrick Henry, where Josh Jacobs are going to end up. It was sort of somewhat of an afterthought, but Swift has been absolutely fantastic, especially for the last 4 games. The worst game he had was 18.9 points scored, and that was last week against Washington. A funny thing happened last week with Swift's usage. It was post-bye week, and Swift had his season high in rushing yardage with 129, but Matt, he had no receptions, and he'd been catching a number of passes over the previous few weeks. He had a 7-catch game, he had a 4-catch game, and you're going to see them getting back to a ton of DeAndre Swift. The Bears go on the road to Arizona. They get a win, and DeAndre Swift is going to finish as the RB1 overall on the week. He's going to score 27 PPR points. He's going to catch 6 passes, just like Devon Achane did last week against this same defense, and he's going to run for 2 rushing scores. DeAndre Swift, your RB1 overall this week. Start him in DFS. Make a trade for him. Do whatever you got to do. Get a little DeAndre Swift on your team.
That's big. Wow. I'm looking at Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette is the big beneficiary of the trade. Deontay Johnson goes to Baltimore. We all hate it for fantasy football, but we do love it for Xavier Legette. Whenever there's a trade, I always go back to the team that was losing the player, giving up the player, trading away the player, and who's left to fill the target void? It's Xavier Legette. He was the target leader last week, though I will say Jalen Coker was the receiving yards leader last week, and Jalen Coker also looks great. So I like Legette and Coker moving forward, but Legette is the number one. Legette is the first-round pick, the number 32 pick. Still, first-rounder, Xavier Legette. Now, let's take a moment to peruse the Xavier Legette profile on playerprofiler.com. I think you're going to be very impressed because there were 2 first-round Xaviers at the wide receiver position. And this Xavier is going to be the leader the rest of the way. Going to outperform Xavier Worthy, outperform Keon Coleman, Rome Odunze, Ricky Pearsall. This is my guy. So here's the Xavier Legette profile on Player Profile. Look at the check out the workout metric. Sub 4.40, hugely explosive. The guy stands 220 pounds. He's huge. The question is, can he earn targets? That's always the question with these size speed specimens, especially as rookies, the ability to command targets, to have that technical ability as a rookie, rare for these super athletes. Legette's already shown that this year, so I love him moving forward, whether it's Bryce Young, whether it's Andy Dalton. Ideally, it's Andy Dalton moving forward. Legette, a top 5 rookie wide receiver the rest of the way.
Yeah, Matt, that's gonna be a tough one to crack that top 5. Not because Legette's not going to play well. I think he's got a pathway. I'm glad you brought up Coker. I think that Carolina.
Well, the pathway is he's going to be there with Ladd, Marvin, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. Then it's going to be Xavier Legette. He's the better Xavier. We're going to look back and go, oh, actually, it's Legette is the better Xavier from this rookie class.
I think that when you look at Xavier Legette, that's a guy that they traded up to get. They traded back into the first round to leapfrog a few teams at the beginning of the second round. Matt, I remember being with you in Detroit, sort of talking about it at the time, and it's because he's an A.J. Brown clone. Athletically, he gives you that big body with speed and athleticism. But there was another player who went a few picks later in the early second round, and that's Ladd McConkey. And Ladd McConkey was a Garrett Wilson clone. Athletically, almost identical to Garrett Wilson. And you're starting to see Ladd McConkey coming on in a major way. We started to see little drum beats for it. You know, week 4, glimpses, he gets 7 targets. Week 4, 7 targets, gets a 17-pointer. Then week 6 and week 7, not the scoring was down, but the targets were still there. 8 targets, 7 targets. Now you're starting to see the offense really starting to come on in LA. You're seeing Ladd McConkey become what he is, which is a terrific fantasy football wide receiver. He had his breakout performance, Matt, 29 points against New Orleans on only 6 targets, but he catches all 6 of them. Looks extremely athletic, basically runs by the entire Saints secondary on one. Everything about Ladd McConkey screams fantasy football success. And much like we talked about with Wilson, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, you go down the list, there has been so many wide receivers in fantasy who get momentum for the following season by a strong second half of their rookie year. Ladd McConkey is going to be a top 18 wide receiver for the rest of the season. We got a glimpse this past week. I think there's going to be a lot more consistency in his scoring. And this past week...
not top 20, not top 15, top 18.
I'm being specific. Top 18, a mid wide receiver 2 for you people who love that kind of talk. But I'll say Jim Harbaugh is a guy who likes to give out effusive praise for guys like quarterbacks, for defensive linemen, for offensive tackles, certainly for running backs. But he signaled out Lad McConkey, and the comparison he made, for me, this is a big one from Harbaugh. Harbaugh came out this week and said that he's basically Steve Smith. He's comparing him to Steve Smith. And you know Steve Smith, a tough wide receiver like that, that's like for Harbaugh, that would be like you comparing somebody to Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's like he's signaling it out because there's also the grittiness, the toughness, the athleticism, where Steve Smith just had that dog in him. So for him to say that about Lad McConkey is basically Harbaugh's code for saying we're going to get him the ball a lot more and we're going to start game planning for him. And the Greg Roman offense is never going to have a ton of passing volume, but McConkey's that kind of guy where he's going to get like 28% of the targets. Moving forward, he's a lock in your fantasy football lineup. And if you can trade for him with somebody thinking they're selling high, Matt, I don't think this is nearly the last 20-point week of the season. I think he's going to have a few more, not necessarily 29 points, but I think he's going to give you multiple wide receiver 1 weeks over the rest of the season. Top 18 finish over the rest of the fantasy football season.
There are plenty of fantasy analysts that still believe that Lad McConkey is overrated, and they are going to feel the pain. They are going to feel he is a must start the rest of the way. And you mentioned players that are comparable to Steve Smith. So based on the metrics, based on the college production, stature, athleticism, is Lad McConkey actually comparable to Steve Smith? No. You know who is? Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle's best comparable player on playerprofiler.com is actually Steve Smith. And Jaylen Waddle has 40-point weeks on his resume. Like, we're accustomed to this. He is one of the best all-around receivers in the league. He's the second coming of Terry McLaurin. He is similar build to Terry McLaurin. He can win in all quadrants of the football field like Terry McLaurin. He's got great route running, deep speed, hands, everything. He is one of the wide receivers I would want to build my franchise around, and yet he's been relegated behind Tyreek Hill, and he's had to find ways to win. One year he won by leading the league in yards per reception. The next year he won with just huge target volume, close to the line of scrimmage. He's one of the most versatile receivers in the league, and finally Tua is back, getting comfortable, fully acclimated, and they go into a game this week on the road where they're 6-point dogs at Buffalo. There's a 50-point game total, and I absolutely adore wide receivers that are going into shootouts on the road as the underdog, especially if they have big playability and especially if they're inexpensive in DFS. So right now, Jaylen Waddle projects to be the number 2 highest owned, most rostered wide receiver on DraftKings and FanDuel. And regardless of the salary, he goes out and he puts up the wide receiver 1 week of all. 40 points this week for Jaylen Waddle.
I love it. Drops the 40-pointer. And Matt, you know, we talk about wide receivers who are underrated right now. Josh Downs is set up to be a top 15 wide receiver for the rest of the season. Like, sort of lost in the shuffle of the Anthony Richardson benching, Joe Flacco coming on, is just how fantastic Josh Downs has been alongside Joe Flacco this season. In games that Joe Flacco played, he has 8 catches, 9 catches, and 7 catches. All of the metrics were there. The targets were all there as well. He had a 12-target week in week 5, and that was bracketed by 2 9-target games. And a funny thing happened this past week. This past week, Josh Downs also drew 9 targets from Anthony Richardson. Josh Downs is the wide receiver 1 in Indianapolis. Josh Downs has passed Michael Pittman Jr. by. Josh Downs is a second-year player with explosiveness, and he is an absolute killer out of the slot. Josh Downs, Matt, he's got 4 weeks this year with 15.9 PPR points or more, including a 22-pointer last week and a 22-pointer in week 4. I don't think that the fantasy football community, whether it's redraft, whether it's Dynasty, quite understand how good Josh Downs is. If Josh Downs was doing this with a different name or slightly better draft capital, we're talking about a second-year player doing this, Matt. And Josh Downs also last year set the rookie receptions record for the Indianapolis Colts. Came out and broke records. The most catches ever by a rookie in Indianapolis, Josh Downs. He was praised by guys like Reggie Wayne. Like Josh Downs, I think, to the moon. As enthusiastic as I am about Lad McConkey, I'm even more enthusiastic about Josh Downs. Do what you can to trade for Josh Downs. You're going to get borderline wide receiver 1 production from Josh Downs rest of the way.
Look at the last 2 seasons at North Carolina for Josh Downs. In his final year, 11 touchdowns, a 78% catch rate. Now, he played 2 more games the year before, so he actually had over 100 catches in a major conference as a sophomore and over 1,300 receiving yards. And then he came out early. By the way, that sophomore year, one of the highest target shares in the history of sophomores in college football, 38.7% target share at UNC. This year, in the NFL as a sophomore, Josh Downs has a 67.9 route win rate on playerprofiler.com. That is easily the number 1 win rate. He is an elite route runner, an incredible playmaker, and Michael Pittman Jr. is the sell in all formats in fantasy football of my lifetime.
And we've got a special bonus prediction from the Podfather himself right here for our player profile audience, and not one that everybody's going to want to hear.
It's exciting to be bullish on players, but Tucker Kraft is a problem. Tucker Kraft has a lot of target competition. He's been succeeding with yards after the catch. He's one of the top yards after the catch tight ends in the league. I love yards after the catch, but it's less predictive than air yards. And Tucker Kraft is last in the league in average target depth. Luke Musgrave will be back week 11. And there's a lot of target competition there. And think about who he's competing for targets with. It's Jaden Reed. It's Romeo Doubs. But it's also Dontavian Wicks. It's Christian Watson. Now the quarterback could be Malik Willis for a week or 2. This is a sell-high moment for Tucker Kraft. He finishes outside the top 20 tight ends in 2024.